Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Woodhounds. My name is Joe, and sitting across from me here at Woodhound Studio is my good friend Dan. Dan, tell everyone hello.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting, fun-filled edition of the podcast here, the number one rated podcast, Firewood podcast in the world.
That is true.
We appreciate all of you who have been tuning in and following along. And for those of you who may not know, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening to this podcast, there should be an option to follow the Woodhounds podcast. So, you know, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't do any, you don't get any spam emails or anything. Just click that follow button and then you'll know every time a new episode comes out. And you can tune in.
And it doesn't matter what platform you're listening to us on. You know, it could be on Google or Apple or Spotify or Pandora. If you look, where is it, Dan? Like a little bit beneath the title, there's a little button that says follow.
Right. And I think it kind of varies depending on the platform that you are on. But, you know, it's just a good way to make sure you catch each and every episode of the Woodhounds.
Yeah, it doesn't spam you or give your email address to some nefarious club somewhere in some foreign country. All it does is it moves our podcast to the top of your list.
Right. And you will then never miss out.
And I think that's a good thing. Dan, the Woodhounds podcast is on every major podcast platform out there. But when you look at our numbers on our dashboard, what do you see with, you know, where are we being heard from the most?
As far as location or platform?
No, the platform. Is it, you know, is it Google? Is it Spotify? Or
Spotify is up there. The number one place that a lot of people listen is just through a web browser like Google Chrome. So they're off of the woodhounds.com website. But then Spotify and Apple are number one and are 2 and 3.
Yeah. I think this is real exciting. I mean, the podcast and being able to talk about firewood is great. But I also think that, you know, being exposed to a new universe of podcasts, and I can't help to think that a lot of our listeners have probably never listened to a podcast before. So, you know, I just think that we can, whatever we can do to help people find us and find us easily, you know, we're here to help.
Yes. And don't forget, you can also reach out to us and give us any suggestions or comments through the woodhounds@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you. So send us an email, drop us a line, tell us what you think. And again, follow along wherever you listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are a podcast dedicated to firewood, the firewood industry, and timber and machines, saws, splitters, handheld tools, whatever, anything that involves firewood.
Man glitter.
Yeah. And we would love to hear from you. If you have a topic that you would like for us to discuss, send us an email.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll even read it on air for you.
That's right. Because the one thing we like to focus on is we want to continue bringing you quality entertainment and quality podcast. So
yeah, and quality firewood, right?
Well, that is a big yes, big I guess topic, or I don't know. Is it really a category of firewood? Shouldn't all firewood be quality firewood?
Well, I think there's probably different degrees of quality, at least what I've seen out there. You know, I think there is probably a flexible definition as to what firewood even is. You know,
that's true.
I guess the fundamentals of to make something firewood is that it's probably got to be made out of wood, and it has to be able to burn.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a variable.
That is true. I've told this story on the podcast before. A gentleman I delivered wood to, he said he had just purchased flame retardant firewood. He says, I put it on my fire, it puts the fire out.
Yep. I actually just had somebody reached out to me to buy some firewood this past week, and that was their biggest complaint, is the stuff that they had gotten before would not burn. He, was not very high quality. So he was real hesitant, and he was like, how can you, how do I know that your firewood's, going to be decent? So
yeah,
I told him, stop by and I will give you a bundle for free. Take it home. If it burns, come back and get the rest. And when he stopped over, he looked at the stuff I had and he said, this stuff looks 10 times better than what I got. I'll just buy it all now.
Yeah. When I think of quality, I think of a number of things. And now that's specific to the firewood. I think, delivering it also brings quality too. Because, I've heard stories, the the delivery driver was drunk. The one guy was caught going to the bathroom in the front yard of the customer's house, so that adds to the quality. But if I'm thinking specifically of the wood, I don't know, let's throw some of the things out there, Dan. Maybe the species,
yep,
the length, the consistency of how long the cuts are, how big the splits are, right?
Yep.
Dirt and mud and mushrooms.
Yep. Overall visual appearance. Yeah.
Garbage. And, and I've had customers show me, where the one guy had it dumped in his driveway. There was still a stain on his driveway from where the wood was dumped. And it was just mud and mulch and just shards of wood that, where some were short. There was even like the little wedge that you cut out of a tree when it's fell.
Oh,
there was those things in there and the little branches and all. And, when I looked at that, I said, well, that's not quality.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of variables, way more than people think about when you think of quality firewood, like what you were just describing. I mean, there's so many different levels of the species, the length, the cut, the size, the color, it's just a lot to it.
I don't think the wood needs to be, precision cut. Now I have a machine, that cuts it exactly 16 inches and it looks great when it's stacked up. But a lot of firewood's made with a chainsaw, and they may not take the time to measure, their cuts. And some are long, some are short, but they average somewhere between 12 and 20 inches.
well, okay. There's one thing though I think we need to probably specify first here. I think quality is more important when you are selling. Like when you're just burning your own firewood, like for me, I don't really care what the piece looks like. It's going to burn. Right. But I think when you're selling firewood, if you deliver a cord of firewood to someone, and then the next time you go back, if your pieces are shorter, if you're different, I think you have to maintain your quality.
Yeah, consistency.
Yeah.
Well, consistency is quality. I think about, like, I went through this phase where I used to stop at McDonald's and get their iced coffee because I thought it was delicious. But it was every time I would stop, or if I stopped at different McDonald's, it was a mystery. I didn't know they're always mixed differently. There was no consistency, and it affected my enjoyment of my coffee in the morning.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can see that with firewood too. And, I think that's where measurements, is it an actual cord or a half a cord? Did the customer get what they actually paid for? I think that's quality too, but when I think though, what makes wood low quality and it immediately turns me off is just mud and garbage that's like in the middle of the wood.
Right.
You know?
Or
What do you?
Yeah, the outside layer being punky. That
Rotten. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that to me.
Where do you think all this? Where do you think the mud and stuff? How does that get into people's firewood?
People splitting into a pile and then scooping it up with a bobcat or a loader and dumping it.
Yeah,
I think that's where the biggest contribute. You know, the wood or the dirt and the just because you wouldn't think about it if you load a piece of wood onto your splitter and you split it. It should be probably fairly clean because nobody likes to cut with their chainsaw through a dirty log.
Yeah.
So after it's split, I think it gets tossed in a pile on the ground. It gets scooped up. And when you're scooping it up, you scoop up that dirt and that debris.
Yeah. And then when that wood sits in that pile for such a long time, it doesn't dry out and the stuff at the bottom kind of sinks into the ground. And it gets moist and it doesn't dry and it's stuck to it, and then when it gets dumped, like when it gets dumped into the back of a trailer or a dump truck, it falls off and it's just a big jumbled firewood salad. I had noticed certain times of the year brings different type of quality firewood, like firewood that is made in the spring, because you're out in the woods and it's muddy and the tree falls down and it plops in the mud and then it gets cut and rolled off to the side. It just picks up a lot of mud.
Yep.
And then it dries off. It really never escapes the bark of the tree and it's just always there.
Or it gets dragged. My dad would always drag logs home through the field and one side was always just full of dirt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, when something is left in a big pile, that's where the mushrooms start to grow. And when I see mushrooms on wood, it's just,
yeah,
I don't like to see it.
Unless that's what you're going for.
Yeah, really. I still find mushrooms on my wood, even though it's stacked, but it's few and far between. But right. I have seen deliveries where it's just garbage wood, where it looked like it got pulled out of a ditch somewhere. And, certain types of wood seem to grow mushrooms easier. Like I think cherry, just because of the way the bark is, I think it holds moisture more.
And oak.
Oak, yeah. Oak, I don't know if it's just how acidic the wood is or because a lot of people leave it sit around for so long to get it to dry out. But oak is bad, I think, for mushrooms.
Yeah. And I always find it on if I stack my wood where I have a face like facing north, so it doesn't get a lot of sunlight, that's where I find the mushrooms grow.
I hate looking at mushrooms. I think when you have a stack of firewood, it's just beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
But when you have a mushroom that's there, it's just ugly.
And the looking at the stack, the other thing that I find is what you mentioned earlier is consistency of your cut length. Like if you look at a stack of firewood that's all the same length, it looks way better than if you have pieces sticking out and indents sticking in and, just a jagged Jenga pile of sticks.
Yeah. I bought some firewood this year. I saw an ad and I thought, what can I lose? He didn't want a lot of money for it. He said it was a little bit less than a cord. And I thought, well, what the heck, I'll buy it. He came and dumped it. When I got it all stacked, it was a little bit less than a half a cord. It wasn't nowhere close. But the wood, it was tree service, so I'm serious. There were little short pieces, real long pieces, big round ones, some that were split, and you couldn't even stack it because it would just fall over because the wood was just oddball lengths and stuff. And, even, the lengths that it's cut would affect your quantity when you're stacking it. But on top of everything else, the wood was just like black or dark brown, like it was just coated, in just garbage where it was left in this big pile all these years. You know, and it had an unpleasant smell to it, and it smelled like earth. And I just look at it and I just thought, this is just the ugliest firewood I've seen in a long time. And I bought it.
And you bought it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's when I think of low quality, I think of that stuff.
Yeah. And we should mention that we're not trying to put ourselves over as we know everything about. However you run your firewood business, we're just giving our opinions on how we view quality. So, because here's one thing.
Well, I've never been accused of that though. And I think I'm very clear about that. It was when, the way I sell firewood is the way I sell firewood. It works for me.
Yep.
And, whatever you do is good enough for me too.
So here's a question. And one thing that gets back to the appearance. Do you sell unsplit firewood? Meaning, if you have a piece 6 inches, like a limbwood piece, do you split it or do you keep it round?
Yeah, I can look anyone in the eye and say I have never, ever delivered an unsplit piece of firewood.
Yep.
Never. It's just, so I think there's nothing wrong, with like limbwood and the smaller stuff, but just the way that I deliver firewood and the kind of firewood that I deliver, it's quality, it's premium. And, I think it looks great when it's split. Like a little skinny branch in a firewood order, it looks kind of hokey to me.
That's my motto as well is big or small, I split them all. Because to me, if I see smaller round pieces, it just, like you said, it looks like it's unprocessed. It's not split. It's not. It doesn't belong there. And that's just me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if it was that small to where I thought, it doesn't need split, then it wouldn't go in the order anyways. It would go into my own woodshed. Yeah. How about infestation? Because, I see, I'll see logs that just got ant holes in them where the ants are still there or they have long left, but, their damage is left behind.
Yep.
Yeah. And then if you do stack that, that's where the water can get into it and it becomes punky.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about making that a part of a delivery.
Yeah. Those are the pieces that I always toss into my personal burning pile. But the one thing that I've found is generally if I run into ants, I leave like those pieces kind of spread out and the ants either disappear and go somewhere, or I don't know if birds come and eat them. But once I stack that wood, like I've never found ants in my stacks of firewood.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you where the ants went. They went into your house. And they're currently eating your rafters.
Well, luckily my wood yard's far from the house. So
Yeah, I hate ants. I went to war with them last year. I kept getting logs that I would bust one open with the splitter, and it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, man. These bugs come pouring out of it, and I'm serious. I'm very sensitive. I don't want ants. I don't want an infestation. We shut everything down and that log goes out. I have a pile way, way back in the woods just to get it far away from everything. Or if it's wintertime, it goes right into our furnace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ants are trouble. And I just think about, when you're delivering wood, I guess if you dump it on someone's driveway and leave, no one would ever know until the customer stacks it up.
Yeah.
But, when we're unloading it, we're almost touching every log again. And, it would be, but we see if it has ants while it's going on the truck. So we don't ever see them at the customer's place.
Yeah, I think dropping off a load of firewood and leaving behind a pile of ants would definitely hurt your quality standings with the customer. That would be a big one.
Yeah. It seems like maybe, and that's probably why I've just always stacked wood and we take that extra time and I pay like high school kids, money to stack it for me. It seems like not all, but a lot of the things that I identify as low quality in firewood as a result of it being left in a gigantic pile.
Yeah, I've had
I
the
don't know.
same experience.
I think if the wood doesn't sit there a long time, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But when you're selling seasoned firewood, you're not going to, if it's going to, you're going to leave it sitting in a big cone, a pile for 6 months, to a year. I don't think.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's also a factor that comes into play. If it's different species of wood will do okay in piles and not stacked, because I know, for instance, like ash is pretty low moisture to begin with, and so there's not it doesn't need a lot of. I just like the airflow. Like I just don't know how the big piles get airflow.
You're probably onto something. I think some wood, like ash, for example, I think keeps for a long time.
Yeah.
For a couple years. Even oak. I've noticed like maple doesn't like to. I think maple needs to be burned in its first year. If it sits around too long, it starts to turn punky.
Yeah.
Cherry gets kind of light. Sycamore, elm, kind of not as bad, but it does a little bit.
Yeah, I did an experiment where I did a loose pile, but I made the mistake of using poplar and basswood, which basswood is like a sponge, so it just will soak up moisture, and just hold it. I mean, it's so after a year, the inside of that pile was. I mean, I would put a piece of wood on a fire and it would just sizzle and foam with the moisture coming out of it. It was not good.
And I would think maybe, you mentioned water coming out. So, it can pick up, environmental water, I guess, rain. But like the seasoning process too, I would think that would only affect, you could say that it would be low quality if the supplier alleges or advertises that it is seasoned firewood and it is not.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with buying green firewood as long as the seller says, yes, it's green. I think seasoned firewood should cost more, but it should also be seasoned.
Yes.
There's a novel idea for you, huh?
So here's an interesting question for you. Do you think if you were to sell green wood, like drop, the tree falls, you cut it up, bucket up, split it, put it in your truck, deliver it. Do you think that has a less opportunity to develop the things we were talking about as far as quality? So what I'm trying to say is delivering green wood actually easier to get your quality looking better?
I guess, in some ways, I think you could probably rule out, unless the tree was garbage, when it was cut down.
Right.
But let's assume that it was a healthy tree. Okay. So you could rule out mushrooms. You could still introduce a lot of mud depending on the conditions it was cut down. And the style of production that you're talking about, I call it split and sell. So if you're splitting it directly into your truck, unless you're hand, throwing the logs in by hand, all of the garbage off that splitter is going into the order. So, if it was a dump truck or a dump trailer or something, so in theory, all of that chaff, what do you want to call that stuff? Splitter scrap. Yeah. That could get into the order too, and dumped onto the customer's driveway.
Yeah. So never mind. That thought was, I just had a thought of like, I was just thinking like all of these things like mushrooms and punkiness and mold and color, like they all come from the process of seasoning your wood, which you want to do. But if you just slashed it or cut and split and sold, maybe you wouldn't have quality issues.
Yeah. And that's where, I'm sensitive to that because that's my customer base. But, there's others. If I were the customer, I would probably care less because, I heat with wood. It's an outdoor wood furnace and I literally wouldn't care. I'm just only concerned about the price. And I would just expect a big truck to come, dump it on the ground and leave. And if it's got garbage in it and stuff, I'd throw that in the furnace too.
Oh, that's right.
Uh-huh. But the firewood that we deliver, is premium stuff. It's all consistent, 16 inches long. The splits are smaller. It's one of the big four that I call oak, ash, cherry, maple, and it's seasoned.
Right.
So but that's reflected in the price. But anything less than that, I would regard my service as not meeting our objective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a lot of people,
who do you think plays a bigger role in setting the quality standards on firewood, the seller or the buyer?
Well, in my area, it's the seller, because, there's, my metropolitan area isn't like the big city. We got, our biggest city is Youngstown and Warren, and then a whole bunch of suburbs. And it is still the people that sell firewood are usually the, just side hustle, people that sell for beer money. And it just goes off of what their definition of firewood is. And from what I've seen, it is just usually split and sell. And I would even put, I did air quotes with split, because you'd see just bizarre shapes, just stuff that's just way too big. It wouldn't even fit in a firebox, and then just all these odds and ends, just junk. Yeah. I think, if you had a fire pit outside, it would be fine. But, if it was going into a new EPA stove, no
trouble.
Yeah.
I think it's always something that if you are, selling, or you're thinking about selling firewood, it's getting to know your customer, because like you mentioned, there's people out there who wouldn't care what the wood looked like, the size, the split. But there's also customers out there who that would be their number one thing,
Yeah. I just, I see it with Facebook and Craigslist, because I'm always on there looking. I like to see what everyone else is doing. And it is just, a guy with a Poulan and a pickup sometimes. And it's just wood that maybe they had a tree fall over, and it's just a fun project for them. And they just, split it and sell it.
They want to make a quick $50.
Yeah. And, more power to them. But I also see people that are delivering wood, and it's just, it's just garbage. And you just wonder why they would even put that amount of effort into what they delivered. The one guy showed me, the order, and, it had beer cans in it. It was just mud and mulch and just garbage wood.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that ends up setting the standard that people can either come to expect or completely be turned off from firewood because of. Somebody might say, well, I don't want to deal with that, garbage firewood anymore. I'm just going to, it's what causes people to, I think, continue looking around for the next guy. And is the next guy going to be better? Or, the next guy then has to prove himself because of the last guy.
That is, I have the story on my company website on how I got started in firewood. Well, got started selling firewood. And it was a friend of mine. He has this big house, this big, beautiful, great room with a big fireplace on the far end, and the brick goes all the way up to the vaulted ceiling. And they never use it. And the last and it was because they bought firewood, and the guy came, his wife was home alone, and the guy, she was scared of this guy, and he leaked oil all over his driveway.
Oh,
he smelled like beer, and she told him, we're never, no more firewood orders. And I told him, I'd bring him some of my stuff. And, when I brought it over, he was saying, you should do this. This is the kind of stuff that I would buy, and then you're trustworthy and presentable. So that's where the idea of Ohio Woodburner started of, I noticed, there is a market out there that's not being met, and it's people that don't buy firewood. And it's because, they don't trust the industry.
Yeah.
And we don't have a very professional and widespread industry. It's largely just, individuals that just do it, as a side hustle, and the standards are their own,
Right.
And that's what I had always said, the difference between a hobby and a business is that the hobby makes sense to you. The business makes sense to the customer. So, the hobbyist that's making firewood and selling it for beer money, it's just the way they want to make their firewood. It's how they're going to do it. And if you want to buy it, fine. If not, I'll find someone else who will want to buy it.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's where you get these interesting interpretations of what firewood is and what quality is.
Right. The guy making it, he sets his standards, and those are the standards. He doesn't care. He'll sell it. Like you said, he'll sell it to the next guy if this person doesn't like it. But
right. Yeah. And from my own, so I had it in my head what I wanted to accomplish in a firewood delivery service, but I wasn't rigid in my belief. I changed and kept adjusting and pivoting and, tailoring it to, what made sense for the customer and how I could do it efficiently. And, I still get people, you're pretty inefficient. But, it's the little things that we're doing, to make sure we bring quality firewood. Like the biggest criticism I get is that we hand load our trucks. So our delivery shows up to the customer's house with, my truck has an 8-foot bed. If they got a half a cord, there's 5 neatly stacked rows of wood in the back of my truck. And it would have been a lot easier just to dump it in with a front end loader, but what didn't happen was, 6 inches of my yard got dumped into that firewood order too, along with all the ants and along with all of your beer cans that you left there when you came over to visit me last night,
Yep.
And, we can attest to the quantity is accurate because we can take the measurement right on the truck.
I find too that loading or handling it after its season, I find is a good opportunity to get rid of all the bark that falls off, because the pieces will shed their bark as they dry. And
right.
Like when I make bundles, I take pieces, and if the bark is loose, I take it off and throw. Again, the appearance. Do you want to just dump in a bunch of wood and have bark and mulch and dirt, or do you want to make it look nice?
Yeah. And that's what, when we're talking quality, we're talking about the physical property of a stick of firewood. But my argument is, the quality is the entire customer experience. So you could have the greatest looking firewood in the world, but if you show up drunk, in a tank top, it might scare away a potential customer because they don't know who you are. And you could be, the nicest person in the world, but people judge you, by appearance. That's why a lot of professional retailers, they all wear uniforms, and, they have personal grooming standards, and all of these things are in place to give off a level of professionalism that instills trust in the customer. And that's what we do here at Ohio Woodburner too. We're uniformed, we're presentable, our trucks are nice, and we're courteous, and we deliver excellent firewood too. To me, that's all quality.
Would you allow for a sleeveless cutoff T-shirt instead of a tank top?
No.
Because I can rock this cutoff shirt. Pretty good.
we even if you tore the sleeves off one of my T-shirts, we'd have to talk. When I take people on with, I'm serious. I call it, it's called being on brand. So even when my daughters go and help me deliver, they wear their Ohio Woodburner T-shirt.
Yep.
And I picked that up too. So for my professional career, I worked for an auto parts I was a regional manager for a national auto parts chain, and they're huge into uniform. It was almost like you hear about Disneyland, when you're in the park, you are in character, you are on brand,
Yep.
You can't break that. And that's the way the auto parts company was. They just had, it was all the way down. You had to have black socks on. You had to have a black belt on. They were very strict about uniform.
Wow.
And then I was I can't remember where I read this. It was a family that started a lawn mowing company. So it was a husband and wife and then their children. And, they were all old enough to help. But they said when they had first started, they would just go out and mow grass. But when they went and bought just simple t-shirts, company t-shirts, it totally changed the way that they were perceived, and they were getting, so much more business because of that perception. And that's where I do think, like the delivery and your image and, your delivery model, all of that, totally, could be lumped into, the quality of your firewood.
Yeah. Those little details make a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
And then the last bit of the customer experience, you have the delivery, but then ultimately the burning and, how your wood burns is the end of the process. So
flame retardant firewood.
I have never had any of that, but I'll have to see if I can maybe find some and set it aside.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have delivered, I've delivered wood. It's been stacked for a year, but it also came at the end of a torrential rain week, and then the freezing came. So it's all frozen, and, it's picked up water. And as soon as it comes in the house, or if it gets thrown onto a fire, there's going to be water pouring out of it. I have told customers, that they should expect, until the temperature raises some, then this log can thaw out, to expect something. But, that's the important thing, is that, your wood's got to burn, man.
Yep. Got to burn. Ready to burn means it's ready to burn.
Yeah. And, I think the definition of seasoned, that's important when we talk about quality. And it's not a gut feeling. It's not a hunch. It's scientific. It's, 20%
or
moisture
less
content.
Yep.
Yeah. And I am always dubious of split and sell. And there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Especially if you can educate the customer that they should be buying this wood a few months out before burning season.
Yep.
Because if you split and sell in November, it's not seasoned firewood. And okay, so it's none of your business, I guess, what the customer does with it, but some people just don't know. And it's not just a practical matter, is you can't get the wood to burn. If it's a chimney, it can gum up the chimney, and it increases the risk of flue fire.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think that's the one area where people might be hesitant to explain to a customer that this wood is not ready to burn right now, because, then it makes it sound like it's an inferior product. It's like, well, this isn't, I want firewood, but you're telling me this stuff might not burn. Like, what are you doing?
It's interesting. If you are not a hobbyist, or if you're not into firewood, or you just have a moderate level of knowledge about firewood, I really do believe, to the common homeowner, that they don't even think that the wood's full of water and it's not going to burn. You forget about it, that the tree was alive and it had roots in the ground, and it was bringing water all the way out to the tippity tips of its leaves, and because of that, it's not going to burn.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think that's where, when we talk about quality, I think there's an educative responsibility, to educate your customer too.
Yeah. It's
they shouldn't be buying wood off of you in February,
right?
To get them through the winter,
Yeah, it's and that's where my larger customer base is, campfires, people who want to burn it that day. So I really have to pay attention to my seasoning process, and if somebody buys wood from me, chances are they're burning it that night. That's that's when they're going to burn it. So the whole letting this season for a month or two doesn't fly for my customers.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's like if you go to the grocery store to buy a dozen eggs, they don't give you a chicken and say, wait 4 weeks and you'll have your eggs.
Yeah. Assuming it's a hen.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you can think of that we've failed to bring up about
I don't
quality
know.
of firewood?
Just, I mean, generally, and again, we're not sitting here trying to make it sound like what you're doing, whatever you do is what you do. We just, I think it's an interesting topic when it comes to firewood because of all the things we just talked about. People not knowing different aspects of what, a piece of firewood to you might look different than it looks to a customer. And, all those quality factors that come into play.
I think we're becoming firewood snobs, Dan.
Don't say that. Oh.
I think let's make a podcast. Let's have an episode about firewood snobs.
Oh boy.
I think that would be a good topic.
It's
like no matter what, I mean, you see it everything. No matter what people have an interest in, like golf, or lawnmowers or coin collecting. Some people have a passive interest in it, and some people are very passionate about it, and some people are just snobby about their knowledge,
Oh yes.
Maybe we might be becoming firewood snobs.
We might be. Goodness gracious, what has this podcast done to us?
Yeah. Well, I will say this. You are the most modest snob that I have ever met.
Oh, well, and likewise to you.
All right. Well, if there is not anything else, Dan, maybe we need to tell everyone thank you for listening.
Yes.
And check in next week for another exciting episode of the Woodhounds.
And if you are tuning in for the first time, new episodes come out every Wednesday at 5 a.m. Eastern. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you do find us on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to follow. If you don't know where to find us, you can go to thewoodhounds.com, and it shows you all the major platforms that we are on. So pick your favorite, go over, follow, and listen.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone, for listening. We really do appreciate it. And we know that you're out there because we see our numbers on the dashboard, and it has just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a great time, and it's been great putting this all together. And hopefully those of you listening out there are enjoying the podcast. And, again, as we mentioned earlier, let us know. Send us an email, thewoodhounds.com or thewoodhounds@gmail.com. All right, Joe, so good seeing you again, and thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And, Joe, we'll catch you later.
Dan, is great seeing you, and thanks to everyone for tuning in.
And everyone,
be cool.